Elena Marcia, a dedicated nurse, risks everything to save a stranger found bleeding on a rain-soaked road. Her heroic act costs her job when her callous boss, Director Simmons, fires her for missing her shift. Gossip spreads, tarnishing her reputation, and Elena faces isolation and self-doubt. Then, a mysterious military tag arrives, hinting at the stranger's identity. As her nursing license faces review and her mother's health worsens, strange noises in a Delta Force medical kit appear. Who was the man she saved? And why are Black Hawk helicopters circling her home? The truth promises to unravel everything. Elena's courage inspires us all. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories to celebrate unsung heroes like her. Your support keeps their stories alive, reminding us that kindness matters, even when it's misunderstood. Join our community, share their journeys, and honor those who choose right over easy. Subscribe now. Elena Marsh's hands dance with a quiet precision, adjusting the IV drip for her final patient of the night with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. At 31, she was the backbone of Riverside Hospital's emergency room. The nurse colleagues leaned on when the stakes were high. Her reputation wasn't built on charm or loud declarations, but on a steady, unassuming competence that spoke louder than words. She moved through the chaos of the ER with a calm that put others at ease, her presence a silent promise that things would be okay. As she tucked a blanket around Mr. Reynolds, an elderly man whose frequent visits had made him a fixture in her routine, he rasped, "You make the best coffee, Lena." His gratitude, faint but genuine, stirred a warmth in her chest. Brewing a small pot of coffee each morning for the older patients wasn't part of her job, but it was part of who she was. A small act of care in a world that often felt too rushed for kindness. "Rest now," she murmured, her smile soft but weary. "Dr. Sullivan will see you soon." The rain had started around midnight, a gentle drizzle that had swelled into a torrential downpour by the time Elena signed out at 6 o'clock a.m. Exhausted, she hunched against the storm, her coat doing little to shield her as she hurried to her car in the nearly empty parking lot. Her thoughts were already home, where her mother, Margaret, would need help with her morning medications before Elena could finally rest. The promise of sleep tugged at her, but it vanished the moment her headlights swept across the road just past the hospital exit. A crumpled figure lay sprawled on the pavement, blood pooling beneath it, mingling with the rain. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she hit the brakes, the image of a motionless man searing itself into her mind. She was out of the car before she could think, phone in hand, dialing 911 as she ran through the rain. "There's a man down, just past Riverside's exit," she said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her throat. "Unresponsive, heavy bleeding." Kneeling beside him, she took in the scene. No wallet, no phone, just a deep laceration across his temple, blood streaming steadily. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her fingers finding his neck. A weak pulse thrummed faintly, a fragile sign of life. Training surged to the forefront, pushing aside the cold, soaking her scrubs, the exhaustion weighing her down her limbs. She stripped off her white nurse's jacket, pressing it to the wound to stem the bleeding, her hands steady even as her mind raced. She stabilized his neck, her eyes locked on his chest, counting each shallow breath until the ambulance arrived. "I'm coming with you," she told the paramedics, climbing into the ambulance without a pause. "Head injury, possible internal bleeding." Her voice was calm, but inside her thoughts churned, replaying every step of her assessment, searching for anything she might have missed. At Mercy General, the nearest trauma center, she stayed until the man was wheeled into surgery, her scrubs clinging to her skin, her body trembling from cold and fatigue. Only then did she check her watch. 7:30 a.m. Her shift at Riverside had started half an hour ago. The realization hit hard, but there was no time to process it. She was already late, already unraveling the life she'd built. Back at Riverside, the rain had slowed, but a different storm awaited. Hospital Director Simmons stood at the nurse's station, his arms crossed, his expression icy. "Two patients waited because you decided to play hero somewhere else," he said, his words sharp and unyielding. Elena's stomach nodded, but she tried to explain. "There was an accident just outside. I couldn't leave him." Simmons cut her off, his voice laced with scorn. "You abandoned your post." He slapped her final paycheck against her chest, the paper crinkling against her damp clothes. Who do you think you are? Some one-woman rescue team? The words landed like blows, and the silence that followed was worse. Colleagues stood nearby, their eyes averted, their silence a betrayal of its own. Elena stood frozen, with water dripping from her hair, her heart heavy with a mix of shame and defiance. Slowly she unpinned her badge, its familiar weight now unbearable, and set it on the counter. Without a word, she turned and left, the hospital doors closing behind her with a quiet finality. At home, the weight of the day settled into her bones. Sitting at her kitchen table, she stared at her phone as the nurses' group chat erupted with gossip. Elena got fired for missing her shift. She was out playing hero with some accident victim. Always so perfect, guess she finally cracked. Each message was a fresh wound, a reminder of how quickly loyalty could dissolve. Few sought her side of the story. Instead, a story took root. One of a nurse who'd buckled under pressure, who'd abandoned her duties on a whim. By evening, the gossip had spread to the community, tainting the reputation she'd spent years building. Texts from former patients questioned her commitment. A neighbor's message was blunt. Reputation is everything in healthcare. Such a shame. Margaret set a bowl of soup before her movements slow but deliberate. At 68, arthritis had robbed her of agility, but her eyes missed nothing. "You should eat," she said, her voice soft but insistent. Elena pushed the bowl away, her thoughts elsewhere. "I keep thinking about him," she said quietly. "The man from the accident. I don't know if he made it." The uncertainty gnawed at her, a relentless ache. Privacy rules kept her from checking on him, leaving her trapped in a cycle of doubt and hope. Had she done enough? Margaret took her hand, her grip firm. "You did what was right," she said. "That's who you are." But Elena wasn't sure. The cost of that choice, her job, her reputation, the trust of those she'd served, felt like a betrayal of the life she'd built. As she gazed at the rain-streaked window, the echo of the storm still in her ears, she sensed something larger looming, a shift she couldn't yet name. That evening, Elena sat in her dimly lit living room, the phone pressed to her ear, as she reconnected with an old classmate who now worked at Mercy General. Her voice was steady, but her heart raced as she asked about the John Doe from that morning's chaos. Her friend's tone grew heavy, relaying that the man had teetered on the edge of life and death for hours. "A strange case," she said, her words laced with unease. During defibrillation, he'd stirred, his eyes fluttering as if clawing his way back to consciousness, an anomaly that left the medical team stunned. Her friend mentioned a tattoo on his chest, not the kind you'd expect from standard military ink, but something cryptic, almost secretive. They'd also found a broken metal tag among his possessions, etched with numbers but no name, like a puzzle piece from a story no one could read. Elena thanked her voice soft but distracted, and hung up. Alone in the silence, her thoughts spiraled around the stranger whose life had unraveled her own. She pictured his face, pale and still, and wondered who he was, why his survival had cost her everything. The next morning, a certified letter arrived, its crisp envelope slicing through her fragile calm. Inside was her termination notice from Riverside Hospital, each word a cold, formal stab confirming what she'd feared. Her career was over. She opened her laptop, hoping for distraction, only to find the hospital's blog, a space usually filled with smoothie recipes and staff shoutouts, had posted a scathing editorial. It didn't name her, but the message was clear. Heroism misplaced, professionalism abandoned, a cautionary tale wrapped in sanctimonious prose. Elena's cheeks burned with humiliation as she closed the tab. Venturing out for groceries later, she felt the weight of the town's judgment. Conversations hushed as she passed, eyes darted away, and a former patient she'd once comforted crossed the street to avoid her. At the coffee shop, the barista, who'd always greeted her with a warm, "the usual," now asked for her name with a forced smile. Each slight deepened the ache in her chest, a reminder that her sacrifice had made her a pariah. That evening, a small package arrived, unremarkable save for the lack of a return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing half a military identification tag, its jagged edge glinting under the kitchen light. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note. "You saved the right person." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Equal parts validation and mystery. She turned the tag over, tracing the sequence of numbers that meant nothing to her yet felt heavy with significance. Who had sent this? We. She called the delivery service, her voice urgent, but they had no record of the sender, a dead end that only deepened her unease. That night, sleep came in fragments, broken by strange noises outside her window. Rustling leaves, the faint hum of an engine. By morning, whatever had lingered on her street was gone, but a new surprise waited on her porch. A military medical kit, its canvas worn but sturdy, marked with the unmistakable insignia of Delta Force, an elite unit she knew only from fleeting news clips. Inside, among standard field gear, was a patch bearing the same symbol her friend had described on John Doe's tattoo. Elena's breath caught as she held it, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Her mother, Margaret, found her later, staring at the items spread across the kitchen table like clues in a detective novel. "What does it mean?" Margaret said, her voice gentle but tinged with worry. Elena's eyes met hers, wide with uncertainty. "I don't know, Mom," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But someone's trying to tell me something." The words felt inadequate, unable to capture the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Fear, curiosity, and a flicker of purpose she hadn't felt since that fateful morning. Later that day, a call from her former supervisor at Riverside shattered her fragile hope. Her nursing license was under review for patient abandonment, a charge as absurd as it was devastating. Without a reference from Riverside, other hospitals wouldn't even glance at her applications. Her phone, once buzzing with messages from colleagues, now sat silent, her texts ignored, her voicemails unanswered. That night, Elena sat at the kitchen table, a single candle casting flickering shadows across her nursing credentials. She stared at the documents, her life's work reduced to paper, and wondered if she should burn them. What was the point of skills no one would let her use? Her mother's voice broke the silence from the doorway. "Do you regret it?" Margaret asked, her tone soft but piercing. "Stopping for him?" Elena looked up, tears spilling over the dam of her composure. "No, Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm just afraid. I know I was right, but no one will ever believe me." Her chest tightened with the weight of her isolation, the fear that her kindness had left her alone in a world that didn't understand. By the end of the week, Elena had withdrawn her nursing license renewal application. The decision felt like surrendering a piece of her soul, but what choice did she have? Local clinics wouldn't touch her, whispers of her unprofessional conduct spreading like wildfire. Her laptop's email drafts folder overflowed with half-written applications for retail jobs, each abandoned when she reached the section asking why she'd left her previous role. How could she explain the truth? That she'd saved a life at the cost of her own? Then Margaret's arthritis flared, a cruel twist that landed her in Riverside's emergency room. Elena drove her mother to the hospital, her heart pounding as they approached the entrance. A security guard stopped her at the waiting room, citing a new visitor restriction policy. His eyes avoided hers, his voice mechanical, but the truth hung between them. She was persona non grata. Elena returned to an empty house, the silence suffocating. She scrolled through social media, only to find her reputation shredded by anonymous accounts. Attention-seeking nurse fabricates heroic rescue. Sources question if accident victim even existed. The lies stung, each word a fresh wound. She shut off her phone and curled into bed, clutching the military ID tag like a lifeline, its cold metal grounding her in a world that felt increasingly unreal. Dawn broke with a sound that shook her from sleep, the unmistakable thump, thump, thump of helicopter rotors, so close her windows rattled. Elena bolted upright, her pulse racing as she rushed to her bedroom window. Two massive Black Hawk helicopters were descending into the empty field behind her house, their blades slicing through the morning mist. Neighbors spilled onto their lawns, some still in pajamas, their faces a mix of confusion and awe. Uniformed soldiers moved with precision, establishing a perimeter around the landing zone. Their uniforms bore no standard patches, only the Delta Force insignia that matched the medical kit on her porch. Elena's breath hitched, her mind reeling. A sharp knock at her door sent her heart into overdrive. She hesitated, fear and anticipation warring within her. Outside stood four soldiers, their faces unreadable, their presence undeniable. Whatever message had been building since that mysterious package had just arrived in full force. The sharp rap at Elena Marsh's door shattered the quiet of her morning. She froze, her hand hovering over the coffee pot, heart thudding in her chest. Peering through the window, she saw them, soldiers in full tactical gear, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. Fear prickled her skin, a cold wave of uncertainty washing over her. What could they possibly want with her? She wasn't anyone special, just a nurse who'd lost more than she'd gained in recent months. Swallowing hard, she opened the door. Elena Marsh? The lead soldier's voice was clipped, professional, but carried an urgency that made her stomach twist. You're needed, ma'am. Please come with us. Her throat tightened, words struggling to break free. What's this about? She managed, her voice sharper than she intended, a flicker of defiance sparking through her unease. The soldier's gaze didn't waver. Major Keller wishes to speak with you personally. The name stirred no recognition, but the weight of the moment pressed against her chest. Something about the soldier's tone, the quiet insistence, the unspoken gravity, compelled her to nod. She grabbed her jacket, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare voice. As she stepped outside, the neighborhood came alive with curiosity. Neighbors spilled onto their lawns, phones raised, capturing the surreal scene as Elena was guided toward a sleek black helicopter idling in the street. Her cheeks burned under their stares, a mix of embarrassment and confusion swirling within her. What had she done to warrant this? The helicopter's interior was stark, clinical, save for the man waiting inside. He sat in a wheelchair, his athletic frame diminished by a web of bandages and medical equipment. Yet his posture was rigid, military precise, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Mid-30s, she guessed, though pain had etched lines into his face that aged him beyond his years. He extended a hand, his grip firm despite his injuries. Ms. Marsh, he said, his voice steady but laced with something deeper. Gratitude, perhaps, or relief. I'm Major Andrew Keller, United States Delta Force. I believe I owe you my life. The words hung between them, heavy and unfamiliar. Elena's brow furrowed, her mind sifting through memories until a spark of recognition flared. You're the man from the road, she whispered, the pieces falling into place. That night, the blood-soaked stranger, the chaos of the accident, she'd acted on instinct, never imagining it would lead here. Keller nodded, his expression softening just enough to reveal the weight he carried. I was returning from a classified operation when my extraction went south. I had to move through civilian areas, no ID, no way to call for help, to reach a secondary pickup point. The accident. He trailed off, his jaw tightening as if the memory still stung. It wasn't part of the plan. Elena sank into the seat across from him, the helicopter's rotors thrumming steadily, grounding her in the moment. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her mind replaying that night. The rain-slicked road, the crumpled car, the man she'd found barely conscious. She'd done what any nurse would, hadn't she? But the way Keller looked at her now, like she was more than just a bystander, made her heart pound with a mix of pride and unease. If you hadn't found me, Keller continued, his voice low but deliberate, I would have bled out before my team could reach me. The mission's classified nature meant I couldn't be identified, even at the hospital. My team was searching, but communication was cut off. I was a ghost. Elena's fingers brushed the metal tag in her pocket, its edges worn from weeks of restless handling. This? She asked, holding it up, her voice barely above a whisper. Keller's eyes flicked to the tag, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He reached into his own pocket, producing its matching half. Standard protocol for deep cover, break identification, carry half. Without you, the hospital was ready to ship me off to a psych ward, thinking I was some combative homeless vet when I came to. Your intervention bought my team the time they needed to find me. The helicopter door slid open, admitting a tall man with a colonel's insignia pinned to his uniform. He carried a folder, its crisp edges suggesting importance. Ms. Marsh, he said, his tone formal, but warm. I'm Colonel Freeman. I understand your actions have cost you professionally. Elena let out a hollow laugh, the bitterness catching in her throat. That's one way to put it. The hospital's accusations, the suspension, the whispers that followed her, they'd stripped away the career she'd fought so hard to build. all for doing what she knew was right. Freeman handed her the folder, his expression unyielding but kind. This ends today. Inside was a military commendation, her name etched in elegant script, the gold seal gleaming in the morning light. This will be presented publicly this afternoon. We've also contacted the hospital board and state licensing authority with a full account of the situation. Elena stared at the document, her fingers trembling as she traced the words. Recognition, vindication, things she'd told herself she didn't need, yet the sight of her name honored in this way stirred something deep within her, a quiet, fierce pride. I didn't do it for this, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Keller's gaze met hers, steady and sincere. Which is exactly why you deserve it. You didn't just save me, Ms. Marsh. The intelligence I carried was critical to the safety of dozens of operatives still in the field. Your actions rippled far beyond that night. By noon, the street outside was a circus. News vans crowded the block, reporters jostling for sound bites as Colonel Freeman addressed them with measured precision. Elena stayed in the background, her heart pounding as she declined to interview after interview. When a persistent journalist thrust a microphone toward her, asking how it felt to be vindicated, she shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. I don't need apologies. I just needed them to know I did the right thing. Not everyone can stand in the truth and still choose kindness. 6 months later, autumn had transformed Elena's world. The trees outside her window blazed with amber and gold, their leaves dancing in the crisp morning breeze. She stood in her kitchen, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air, her life irrevocably changed. The military commendation had sparked a flood of job offers from hospitals nationwide, each eager to claim the hero nurse for their staff. But Elena had turned them all down. The spotlight, the accolades, they weren't what drove her. Instead, she volunteered 3 days a week at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, helping soldiers navigate the rocky transition to civilian life. The work was grueling, the pay a fraction of what she'd earned at the hospital, but it filled her with a purpose she'd never known before. Each conversation, each small breakthrough with a veteran client, reminded her why she'd chosen this path in the first place. She saw Keller's resilience in theirs, the quiet strength that lingered even after the battlefield faded. Her mother's health had taken a turn for the better, thanks to a new arthritis program Elena suspected, but never confirmed, Keller had arranged through his connections. The media frenzy had died down as quickly as it had erupted, leaving Elena to her quiet routine. She'd given one interview, carefully sidestepping details of the military operation, instead speaking with fire in her voice about medical ethics and the duty to act when lives were at stake. Sometimes the right choice isn't in any handbook, she told the reporter, her words steady with conviction. You trust your training, your humanity. That's enough. Each morning, Elena prepared 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, savored slowly as she gathered her thoughts for the day. The other she placed near the window, where sunlight would keep it warm, a quiet ritual she couldn't fully explain even to herself. Beside it sat the framed Delta Force insignia, a gift from Keller, its presence a reminder of the night she'd life changed forever, a testament to the truth that courage and compassion could outshine even the darkest doubts. The small, framed military commendation sat not on a wall for all to see, but tucked away on a modest wooden table beside a cherished photograph of Elena's mother. Its placement was deliberate, a private tribute rather than a badge for public admiration. The document itself, creased from years of careful handling, remained hidden in her desk drawer, a silent testament to a moment that had shaped her life. Elena wasn't one for displays of pride. The commendation was a reminder of choices made, of burdens carried, not a trophy to be flaunted. Every so often, a postcard would arrive in her mailbox, sent by someone who chose to remain nameless. One depicted a vast desert under a scorching sun, another a jagged mountain range piercing the clouds, and once a serene beach glowing under the hues of a fading sunset. There were no words, no explanations, only a small, stylized K etched in the corner of each card. Elena never sought out the sender or penned a reply. Instead, she placed each postcard carefully in a wooden box, where they rested alongside her old military ID tags, now fused back together after being shattered by time and circumstance. The box was a vault of memories, a quiet archive of moments she couldn't fully share with the world. From the creaky wooden porch of her modest home, Elena could see into the neighboring yard where the Hansons lived. Their 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was a bundle of curiosity, her wide eyes often peering through the slats of the fence, watching Elena with a mix of awe and wonder. Elena didn't mind the scrutiny. There was something pure in the child's gaze, untainted by the judgments of adults. Just the day before, Elena had overheard Emma chatting with a friend, her small voice carrying across the yard. "Mom says everyone blamed her at first, but in the end the whole world thanked her," Emma had said, her tone matter-of-fact, yet tinged with admiration. Elena's lips curved into a faint smile at the child's words. The truth, of course, was far more complicated, but there was a certain beauty in the simplicity of Emma's understanding. It wasn't the dramatic swoop of helicopters or the weight of official honors that brought Elena peace. It was the quiet realization, reflected in a child's innocent perspective, that doing what was right mattered more than any applause. Elena often thought about that moment, when kindness had demanded everything from her. It wasn't just a fleeting act of generosity. It was a choice that had stripped her bare, exposing her to the raw edges of human judgment. She remembered the weight of it, the way her heart had pounded as she stood at the crossroads of what was easy and what was right. The world hadn't understood her then. Whispers of blame had followed her, sharp and unrelenting, from those who couldn't see the bigger picture. She had felt the sting of isolation, the ache of being misunderstood, and yet she had pressed forward, driven by a conviction that burned brighter than fear. That choice had revealed her, stripped away the layers of who she might have pretended to be, and left only the core of who she was. The world, Elena had learned, didn't always celebrate courage in the moment. True heroism often went unnoticed, buried under the noise of public opinion or the rush to judgment. She thought of the countless others who, like her, had paid a price for their principles. There were no parades for them, no medals pinned to their chests. They were the ones who stood firm in hospital corridors, making impossible decisions to save a life. In classrooms, teaching truths that challenged the status quo. In offices, speaking out against wrongs that others ignored. These were the quiet heroes, the ones who chose integrity over convenience, even when no one was watching. Elena's vindication had come eventually in a way that felt almost surreal. The roar of Black Hawk helicopters, the crisp salute of uniformed officers, the formal presentation of that commendation. They were moments etched into her memory, vivid and overwhelming. But as dramatic as they weren't what sustained her. The real victory was quieter, more personal. It was the certainty that settled in her chest when she lay awake at night, knowing she had stayed true to herself. It was the knowledge that, when tested, she had chosen the harder path, not for glory, but because it was right. She thought of Emma again, that small figure peering through the fence. In the child's eyes, Elena saw a flicker of something profound, a recognition that heroes didn't always wear armor or stand in the spotlight. They were ordinary people, like Elena, who made extraordinary choices in the face of doubt and criticism. Emma's words had been a reminder that vindication didn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrived in the form of a child's quiet understanding, a neighbor's whispered story, or the simple act of being seen for who you truly are. Elena's story wasn't just her own, it was a mirror for anyone who had ever stood at that same crossroads, weighing the cost of doing what was right. She knew there were others out there who had felt the weight of judgment, who had been misunderstood or cast aside for their choices. Perhaps they too had stood alone, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the world might never understand. And yet they had pressed on, driven by a moral compass that refused to waver. In a world obsessed with likes, shares, and fleeting validation, Elena's journey was a quiet rebellion. It was a reminder that integrity wasn't measured by the roar of a crowd or the glow of a screen. It was found in the stillness of a heart aligned with its deepest values, in the courage to act when no one else would. Heroes, Elena knew, weren't just in stories. They were all around us, ordinary people making extraordinary choices, often in the shadows. And they deserved to be seen, not for the sake of praise, but because their quiet courage was what kept the world turning towards something better.